Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. I've got Suzie Latchford from Heal with Horses in Canada. She's out on Lake Ontario in a peninsula. It's a wine growing area. Sounds divine, and it is divine, about 2.5 hours east of Toronto. However, Canada has this thing called a winter. And having lived in Canada myself, I'm always astonished when people are doing the kind of work that we do there, because it can be really tiring and tough. And I first visited Heal with Horses, I think, almost like 15 years ago. And when it was still quite new, and it's been growing and growing and growing. And I sort of watch these things from afar in awe, watching as people do this amazing work, but often in conditions that are really quite challenging. So I've got Suzie on the show to talk to us about how she does what she does. And hopefully we can learn how to maybe all be a little bit tougher, or maybe more grateful for the slightly more temperate climates that we're working in when we catch ourselves complaining. So, Suzie, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about Heal with Horses and what you do, what's your approach, and why you got started?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Mhm.
So Heal with Horses came about with absolutely no plan, really. I read a couple of books, one including The Horseboy, which actually led me to Rupert and Ileana. So in that, I'm the type of person that will go, how do I learn that? It's really inspiring me to have read that book and then looked, researched a little bit more, and how do I learn that? So I just am the type of person that will reach out and see what can birth from that, I guess. And lo and behold, yourself and Ileana came and trained a bunch of us here at the farm. At that point, it was very new. We did have a couple of structures to be under during that during that, but that's how I started. And before that, a certification called FEEL, which is more like emotional reflective work with horses, non-ridden.
Okay.
And with that first certification, I didn't feel it was as useful for children, I guess you could say. And whereas the Horseboy method specifically, was working more with younger people. And I'm the type of person as well, like I have a culinary background, so everything's a recipe to me. So
That's interesting.
yeah, that's my analogy in life is recipes, and taking, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then all of a sudden you have hopefully a really good recipe at the end. And so Horseboy is one of the main ingredients at our farm.
It's interesting that you say that. I'm always encouraging people to do more than Horseboy. As you may know, we actually have 3 programs now. We have Horseboy method, movement method, which is no horses, how to do the stuff at home or in schools. And then we also have something called Taquine now, which is how to train the horses in the classical system from the ground, all the in-hand work, long reining and lunging. And this is done with, adult autists, people with trauma, veterans, first responders. And that came out of necessity because we were battling for time to actually train and maintain and condition our horses. And then I was read, oh gosh, actually, it's our clients. They could be the horse trainers, and they turned out to be really good at it. But I'm always encouraging people to not just do what we do. And this is something which I find perplexing about the therapeutic or equine assisted world is that we all know that in any professional capacity, you want to have as many strings to your bow as you possibly can, right? As many arrows in your quiver, because you just never know the context of the particular person who's going to walk through your door. But so often one finds it's like, no, I only do this, and I die on this hill, of this philosophy. And it's like, well, right, but presumably, if we're asking people to make changes, like an autistic child to speak or somebody to go through some transformation process, if we're not doing that ourselves, if we're like rigid in a belief system, how are we going to, what tools have we got really to help somebody else go through? We're not really leading from the front, are we? So I'm always very encouraged actually when people say I don't just do horse boy, I do like three or four other things because that to me is totally sane. So you've now grown from these small beginnings into quite a big operation. You've got an indoor space. You have 27 horses, you told me, and 100 animals, social animals. Because as you say, you never know what someone's going to get into, and social animals of all kinds. Bring out communication. But we're here. I'm interviewing you from Spain. We're in
Like,
November, heading to December, and I would warrant that the weather is rather different here where I am to where it is with you. How do you guys up there in Canada deal with the extreme weather conditions? Because even if you've got a covered space, sometimes it can be hard to drive people to get to you in blizzards and that sort of thing. How do you make that whole thing work?
it's definitely challenging. Like, we kind of, our doors stay open in the winter and we do keep scheduling, but we have to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? We have to communicate with our participants or clients very openly and be on the same page as far as like, if it's totally ugly out
Mm,
and dangerous to try and get here, or the horses are just not able to, you know, be themselves and
mm,
weather circumstances, then we have to reschedule and cancel. And then that also has, financial repercussions as well, because winter is already tough enough. But I
mm.
guess, you know, being in our 15th year now, we've learned that we have to be as busy as we can in the spring and summer and shoulder seasons to prepare for the winter.
Right. I mean, how do you deal with it? Because you know how, particularly with autism, people can get very latched onto and obsessive with the things that they like. And I know I've been out to your place, admittedly, a long time ago, but it was delightful, and I could see how an autistic child or person could really rely upon that for the high point of their week. So when you're dealing with that kind of extreme focus, do you find that the kids and adults that you're working with are actually pretty adaptable? Does growing up in Canada actually make people weirdly a bit more adaptable because you just kind of have to roll with the seasons, or is it
Mhm.
actually quite a problem?
I think there's a scaling down that kind of happens from the summer. Like, we know, like with families, and some families might even be bringing their child twice a week,
Mm.
times when the weather is good. But I'm telling you too, though, but in the summer there's heat problems that we have to
Ah,
deal with
yes, that's
that
true.
are
Canada also gets really hot. Yeah, yeah.
bad. So it's like you're euchred almost all the way around. But we make do. We try to do things earlier in the day.
Mm,
But again, communication with our families, and the scaling down, like, as school approaches in September, everybody's schedule changes, and so there's already that little bit of interruption
mm,
that I know is challenging for the parents of kids on the spectrum that have to get out of their summer routine and then get back into a school routine, and then
mm.
the going into the winter and having that interrupted even more. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's not like an abrupt stop.
Right. And
There's
it makes, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
bit more leading into it. And I didn't even realize that until you asked that question. So
Well, I find it intriguing because, we actually deal with this in the opposite way in Texas, where, the extreme heat through several months of the summer would really limit like the hours you could do things and that it was even safe to do things. And we had to really think around this. But one of the things I find is that if one is following nature, weirdly, the children, particularly the really obsessive, slightly rigid autistic children, I find that they follow it more easily when it's nature than when it's a sort, it appears as an arbitrary thing. That even when cognitively there might be some challenges in understanding, well, why can't I go today?
yeah,
There's something so uncompromising about a heat wave or a blizzard that, and maybe that's an intrinsic structure of the work that we do that we don't really value. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? I think we take it for granted, but it sort of actually, do you not feel it aids that flexibility in the human being? Because so
Oh,
many people live sort of divorced from nature, including in Canada, you can be inside, or in Texas, you can be in the air conditioning. But as soon as you
yeah.
actually have to go out, you do have to follow that pattern. And perhaps by the time someone's been with you for a while, they're actually in that pattern, and neurologically they're adapting simply because of the environment. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I would agree 100%. And it's so, yeah, we have to be that way
Yeah.
with the, at least, I mean, on the farm here, like we live, eat, and breathe. Like we walk out our back door and we're immersed in our animals. Like
Mm.
there's 50 chickens or turkeys running at you, and then you go out and open another gate, and then you're in the general population, as we call it, with the goats and the pigs and the mini horses. And but yeah, I would definitely agree
Yeah.
that just ingrained perhaps, and with the more structured autistic people, yeah, they and they don't necessarily want to be out in it either.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so interesting. I think that one of the great ills of our modern life is that one can set up sort of unreasonable expectations about life,
Hmm.
which then effectively mean that one can never deal with the flexibility needed, so disappointments are crushing, rather than, well, it's snowing out or it's just too hot. Yeah, sure. But that faith that, well, the weather will change and I'll be able to go back again. And until just sort of looking at this through the Canadian lens just now,
Hmm.
it hadn't occurred to me actually that so much of the work that we all do, because it's also nature based and outdoor based, is probably getting more flexibility and life skills into people than we realize.
You really
You
put it that way. It's
in our preamble before we sort of switched on the record button here, you were talking really quite eloquently, I thought, about your follow the child principle, and the idea of structures. This sort of leads in from this nature idea that your structures need to be somewhat invisible, but at the same time very sound. And nature imposes structures, right, that are exactly like that. But talk to us about that. How do you implement your follow the child strategy, and how do you make sure that you are structured without it seeming oppressively so?
for me, it's I think being around horses so much has taught me to be more, to feel more, because that's what they do when they're reacting to something. It's a feeling that they're getting. And then and when people come here, it, each person's different. And so I've learned to gauge how to and to change my approach with each person depending on what their body language is saying in a sense, which is also how horses live through body language, right?
Mm.
And so I just allow that to, I guess it's being empathetic or compassionate but that gives me a sense of how to lead the session from there. So we'll have so and so come, a little girl who's on the spectrum, and she's fun and quirky, but she also has things that she has to have with her. And so for instance, it's a little, she brings her bicycle helmet and it has spikes on the top and it's pink and cute, but one day she wanted to be a unicorn. And we might have, I think we had a horse in already, but she wanted to ride the mini horse. So we got mini horse in and put the unicorn, we have a little unicorn costume or whatever that you can put on their halters and
Of
stuff.
course you
And
do.
so, and so away went. She had her unicorn helmet on and all of her stuff. And, Lily had her unicorn helmet on. They went, down the driveway and then came back, and that was enough. And then she was on to the turkeys. So we go play with the turkeys, and then, and then she might want to do something else. And so we just and we're just elaborating on her intelligence and what she has to share and her questions, and it's really quite fascinating, the whole process. So
Where do you sometimes encounter people who this certainly happened to us in the early years when we were, always following the child because, as you say, we wanted them to sort of develop this voice
mhm.
where particularly people who are struggling to communicate, they're being so directed all the time that they kind of lose the motivation to communicate, and communicating becomes, a schlep, an effort that they maybe don't want to do because they're not being listened to anyway. And so we often found that spending that time at the beginning, particularly sometimes, a couple of months, just building that relationship where they really knew that we would listen to whatever they brought to us, even if it was negative, like, I don't want to do this, or I want to get down from the horse, I don't want to get on the horse. Like, yes, thank you. Please tell me what else you don't want to do, because, we're after communication here. We don't care whether it's a yes or a no. But from our point of view, from our side, it has to be yes, because we don't want to be shutting down communication. But, we would sometimes get challenged by, or, criticized for saying, well, you guys have no structure. It's just like so open and so loose. How are these kids gonna, develop without you imposing some kind of obvious structure? And obviously, we had our answers to that. But I'm intrigued to know what yours are, because I know that you're also really following the child in this way.
Yeah, I feel it's learning from the child. And
Mm.
if you're wanting to remain in a structured type session, then you're not, in the first time or second time they come, you're going to lose that trust. And that if you can't get out of your own way on how you feel that structure should be, or that session should be run. So you're
Mm.
getting out on those first few sessions of building that communication and building that trust. And then maybe they'll never get confident enough to get on the horse if that's what the goal is. And another thing is still having the parents feel like their kid isn't getting anything out of it unless they're on that horse. But
Right.
there's always
Do
there's
you run
always
into that?
yes, definitely.
How do you cope with it when you do?
Well, we just assure the parents that that there's reasons for why we're doing it this way, which is basically what I just said. And
Mm.
that's building that communication and trust as with that person so that they don't say no automatically.
Do you find that most parents actually do accept the logic of that, or do you sometimes get pushback?
Yeah, sometimes we get pushback
Hmm.
for sure.
What's your sort of second phase of explanation? Like, because I say you could put it in that way that you just put it to me, and that obviously to me makes a lot of sense. But as you know, sometimes it doesn't. To another, if you have to go a bit deeper, what do you tell them?
Yeah, and I guess also, like, I should mention this, is that before, like, let's say, we'll give you an example. We haven't met the family yet. Somebody, a parent, has just called and or emailed and said, we're interested in trying this for a child. They're this age and just got diagnosed as being on the spectrum and blah blah blah. So we invite them to come for a free meet and greet, so that that the child comes and the parents come and they get a good idea of the environment and our philosophy as well, and sort of preparing them for some of those things that could happen before they happen definitely makes it a bit smoother.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we used to sort of what I've found is I generally now, or for the last few years, say to a parent or caregiver or here is the neuroscience about why we have this approach, and I'll even like have the diagram up on the wall. So like, that's your cortisol problem,
Mm-hmm.
and this overstimulated nervous system problem. Over here, we're going to create this oxytocin and this BDNF, this brain-derived neurotrophic factor for the neuroplasticity, and this is how we're going to do it. But if we threaten the child effectively with constraints, we're just going to get more cortisol, so we won't get that communication. Are you down? And then they'll normally say, "Oh yeah," but then what I'll say is, right, but you'll forget that.
Yeah.
So and we are not guaranteeing that we're putting your kid on a horse, because if the kid does not want to, we're certainly not going to do that, which is, as you say, why you have all those amazing other animals as well. So usually what I do is I actually say to them, I'm going to want you after 12 weeks to do a movement method course on, even just online or a short one with me, so that
Yeah.
you do really understand what we're doing and you can take it home. And then if they say, well, we haven't got time, I'll say, okay, I'll extend it by another 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then if the answer is still no, then I'll say, hey, listen, maybe I need to make this place available to a family that will go the extra mile at home. Because
Yeah.
as good as we are, we won't get the job done. The only thing that will get the job done is if you actually do this at home, kind of 24/7. Do you have a way of sort of bridging that gap? Because I feel a lot of listeners and viewers are facing this issue, you know, and often it's a
Mm-hmm.
credibility issue because we all have imposter syndrome, right? And we've all had people say, well, you're just playing with ponies. And I'm like, well, actually we are. But, there is this really good neurological reason why it works. But there's nothing actually wrong with pleasure and joy, right? So yeah, you're obviously very experienced now, and you can hold your ground. But let's say you've got a young employee; she's not, as confident as you, perhaps, or so. How do you help everyone to understand what the true nature of structure really is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Our manager right now is finishing her master's in counseling and psychology, or she's going to be a psychotherapist. And when she came to us as a placement student when she was doing her undergrad in behavioral, what was it, behavioral psychology. Anyways, she tends to be very list oriented and very, structured, and so we've Liv has become less structured now, I guess, within the sessions and her facilitation skills. So where am I going with this?
That it
Yeah,
you have to put your own staff through the learning curve too. Yeah.
yeah. So she can be that way outside of sessions until the session comes, and then she has to kind of
Okay.
start following the lead of the of
Sounds
the
like
child.
she's more of a client than, than an
Yeah,
employee.
doing very well now, and so it
Yeah.
can be learned, right?
Yeah.
It can be learned. It's not black and white.
Absolutely. I mean, and to be honest, I think in the early years, I probably would have tried to be more black and white in that way. But by the time horsepower method sort of became a thing, I'd already had my ass handed to me so massively by my son, with
Yeah.
every time I tried to, impose that kind of authoritative thing that I realized, yeah, this is futile. But in fact, it's not just futile; it's damaging and wrong and against happiness. And when I looked at my own childhood, I was like, yeah, I wasn't. I think this is why it's so hard for people to learn follow the child, as none of us grew up that way, right?
Yeah.
We all grew up very directed and told what to do. How's that affected? When I first met you, you had these very young children who are suddenly now not so young. How has that
No.
affected your own parenting, would you say?
Oh, I've I've always been a very flowy, not I hate trying to put things in a box.
Mm.
It's a lifelong of mine, and which has been hard. Well, with my parenting skills, Ron and I are both very on the same page as far
Yeah.
as raising our kids. And we may get criticized for being too open or too easy or not having enough structure, but our kids are all still here.
Well, that's
Which
to
is
my
okay.
mind.
We're like, well, that's okay. We'll just, build something onto the house and everybody can stay here, be a
Yeah,
community and blah, blah, blah. But
yeah,
I have that naturally, I feel.
yes, yes. I
And
I think you're right. I think you and Ron both do because Ron, I know your husband, and he's also one of these very flexible lateral thinkers. But at the same time, you
yeah,
guys do have a lot of structure. Like, Ron is a construction guy. You
yeah,
can't build a house without structure. You
exactly.
can't run a farm without structure.
Yeah.
And you can't keep livestock without structure. So I often think people who don't come from those backgrounds misunderstand what structure means, right? They often think it means constraints, but actually structure, I always feel structure is like I'm looking at you now and what I see is Susie, right?
Hmm.
But actually, there's a structure to Susie. There's this skeleton that's inside you.
Yeah.
There's this nervous system, which is very structured. There's this, pulmonary system. There's all these structures. But when I look at you, I'm not really aware of that, right? I'm just more aware of the personality, the aesthetic, the
Hmm.
person. Or if I look
Hmm.
at a tree, I'm not looking at the transpiration of that what's going up and down from the roots to the leaves. I see tree. But of course,
Yeah.
there is structure. And I always feel that that's where people get structure wrong, that they try to make it visible when it should
Hmm.
be invisible. And I feel that like if you're living the kind of life that you're leading, on a farm like that, the structures are so inherent.
Yeah.
You know what I
That
mean?
absolutely. And it's not 9 to 5. See, and I've struggled, over the years with like I don't have a 9 to 5 job.
Yes.
And so but we've grown up in a society that says your day is supposed to be 9 to 5 and you're working from this time to that time. And then on those times that you're not working, you're supposed to be doing this, and this. So
Yeah.
that's, as I said, coming out of a big burnout, like those aspects of feeling guilty for, not having the same structure that other families have. And our house looks like a barn most of the time.
You could see mine. That's why I've got this false thing behind me.
Yeah, and the guilt of that and living in an unfinished house and you know
You have guilt around that?
yes. Yeah.
Why? Why, Susie? Because the happiness that you give people through your farm and your non 9 to 5 and everything is so tangible.
It
Where's this
is.
guilt from?
I think it's just inherent, like not, I grew up in a middle class family. Parents were teachers and different age and time in history, and it was all about having a nice house and having it be clean, and extracurricular activities are scheduled, and like our life is just like and I'm okay with that. I think now, but there's a huge amount of acceptance that you go through because you're not those things.
That's so interesting to me. It's funny when I met you, I never would have thought that you'd have been somebody who suffered that way because,
Yeah.
when you see people from the outside, I came to your farm, I came to your house, I saw you were doing great work, you had a great relationship, you had great kids, the house is beautiful. I don't expect houses to not be a little bit messy because you should see mine if we live outdoor lives.
We're here
And
all
it
the time.
never would have occurred to me that you had anything but pleasure in that experience. Were you always feeling this guilt, do you think, or did it creep up?
I think I've always had it for sure. Because
Does Ron have it too?
I have a very type A mom,
Okay.
very, very type A mom, and love her to bits. And we're so involved in our lives, both of my and always have been. But she's very, very organized, very controlled, and very structured.
Does
And
she criticize you for your way
a
of
li-
life?
yeah, a little bit, yeah, for sure.
Have you challenged her and say, all right, mum, there's 100 animals outside. Tell you what, we'll swap for a week. I'll do the housework. You
Yeah,
keep all that going. And then at the end of that, let's have a little talk about structure.
and I don't get any more animals. You have too many animals. Cut down. Like this year, it was like I want a turkey. I need turkey in my life. So now we have four turkeys and two peacocks.
Okay.
And I'm
And
like,
how do you stop the raccoons and the coyotes getting them?
the coyotes have been an issue,
Yeah.
but we have more of a compound now that's
Yeah.
fenced. Then the fences are high enough,
Yeah.
and we big dogs, but they're wimps and are always with us in the house unless they come out with us. But um,
Well, the packs of coyotes will eat them too. So yeah, yeah, they
oh yeah,
have, yeah.
oh yeah, they're bad.
Especially up
They're
where you are, because you have brush wolves, right? You have the coyote wolf hybrids, which are actually quite a lot bigger. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
But some raccoons, I don't know. They've never, knock on wood, bothered us too
yeah,
much. That might just be because of the dogs, and there's just
yeah.
always on around here. So
So it's very interesting to me. So you also just said that you've just come out of a big burnout, and
mhm.
again, that's intriguing to me because I think that's a bit of a non-addressed subject in what we do. I myself have gone through various times of burnout with this because what we do is just so intense, between the long hours, between the responsibilities with the livestock, between the responsibilities for just keeping people alive with
Mhm.
horses. And then on top of that, now to deliver the service. And then, the financial instability and so on. Tell me about this burnout. Did it hit you by surprise? And what did you do about it?
Well, it's been going on for quite some time, and I feel like you just get used to it.
Mm,
Can't stop, right? This is the thing. Like when you're feeling exhausted and you know that you're not right, but regardless, the amount of responsibility on your shoulder, it's like
mm,
holding the it's like, there's so many people responsible that you're responsible for and so many animals that you're responsible for that it just gets to be so overwhelming sometimes. When you have to manage staff and you have to pay your staff and there's payroll, and then, our animal expenses just for hay and feed is 42,000 a year. So, and then trying to describe what we do to get funding, as I said in a box, is really challenging. Thank goodness for Chat GPT. I've just become best friends with
yeah,
AI
yeah. AI really does help with this stuff. I agree.
for grants. Like I was like, "Oh, it's just such a breath of fresh air," because
Mm.
they just put it in the box that it needs to go in, and then you know
Yeah.
engage the reader that's
That I
reading.
don't consider that cheating at all. It's exactly what AI is supposed to do. Yeah. It's not supposed to
Yeah,
write your novel. It's supposed to get you a grant. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I would spend probably weeks on a grant, whereas now I can spend hours.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the lead up to the burnout, it's gradual until you get to a point where I was in a bad depression, like I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how bad it was until I started to feel a little better. And
Okay.
this is just 6 weeks ago. So,
Okay.
and then yeah, the 42,000 it is to feed your animals, getting the hay in, feeding them, getting the hay out there, getting the feed in for all of the animals, and not having always enough money for payroll to have someone come in and feed for you like on the days that you need it, right? So you
Mm.
do it, and it just compacts, and it just got to the point. And at my ripe old age of 53, like there's other contributing factors for women that of
Sure.
that age that impact as well, and your body is and your mental wellness just goes, you're
Did it, when it hit you, how did it manifest? Like, did you just collapse? What was what,
well,
and how did you keep things going?
yeah, high blood pressure for a long time, like really
Yeah.
bad anxiety to the point where I'm just up in flight mode all the time. So my central nervous system is like, oh, there's a bear out there constantly,
Mm.
not sleeping, which then would exasperate everything else. Not resting properly, not giving your body that time it needs to, or not giving not your body not being able to, or your mind not being able to deliver that rest because it's just in
Right. So how did it manifest? Like, did you suddenly find
cortisol.
yourself not getting
Cortisol.
out of bed one day? Sorry?
No, cortisol. No, I always had to get out of bed. Like I always had to do it, but it just made it like for a while, I didn't even want to be around horses.
Yeah.
It was like connecting with our horses. I was kind of like taking a back burner on wanting to
Hmm.
facilitate like all those things that you loved and enjoyed that are all of a sudden you're so terrified because you're like, where did my love go for that? Because it feels like a burden right now.
This is so honest that you're talking about this. Okay. So w- do you feel you're out of it? Do you feel you're still in it? Do you feel how are you coping with it? How are you dealing with it?
I'm I'm coming out of it. So now I'm all of a sudden I'm being more mindful and going, okay, you need to give yourself a break and be nice to yourself because if you
Mm.
keep going on this way, you're going to be good for nothing. And I know that I still have a lot of work to do in this life,
Mm.
and I need to have the energy in order to move forward with that because I'm not done yet, and I feel that intrinsically and authentically, intuitively.
I
So
generally feel that, yeah, when we have these nadir moments, these, bottom of the barrel moments, it's often actually right before there's going to be the next transformation to the next really
mhm,
good thing. I mean, I
mhm.
think we've all gone through enough of them in our lives to sort of know that pattern, but it's very, very hard to see that when you're in it. And as you say, it's so relentless, the life that we lead. It's so
Yeah,
interesting listening to you because, this is normally what our clients come to us with, right?
yeah,
It, I think
yeah,
what do you find that it's giving you actually even more empathy with the clients because you can really,
yes, yeah. It's almost scary because you can relate so much better. So yeah,
yeah, the vulnerability.
yeah,
Thank you for talking like this because, it this work that we do, it's so predicated on having a strong personality, leadership, all of these
yeah,
things. And as you know, I mean, it's predominantly female run our world. Luckily, we've got some great men within Horseboy World, but it's vast majority is female. And so one of the
yeah.
things I really value about that is that you see a lot of really great female leadership and that knock-on effect, not just to girls, but also to boys, to see strong women in these leadership roles. But
Mhm.
I think it's also difficult because, as you say, there are certain things that can hit, and you were saying just now at 52, there are certain contributing factors. So, can we talk about that actually really directly? Because I think that menopause is something which isn't talked about enough in our line of work, because pretty much all the women who are my colleagues, have been running these programs for a while. They perhaps started them in their mid 30s, and then
Yeah.
right about the time that they are really hitting their stride, boom, the menopause hits.
Yeah.
How does this? I know so many of our listeners and viewers will be going, "Yup, that's me." Tell
Hmm.
us about how that impacts you and the work. And
Well, you don't know who you are anymore. Like I was a bit of an identity crisis I found for myself. And I talked to my doctor about it, and he goes, "You don't know how many women that have come in my office and said that they don't know who they are anymore." And that's a big one. So it's rediscovering yourself in a different way. All of a sudden, let I'm going to talk about periods because for me, my period or my menstrual cycle each month was a bit of a navigation tool for me.
okay,
So I knew it was like it's an ebb and flow, and then
yeah,
all that's gone, and you can't. It's like you're lost a little
you're
bit.
rudderless, maybe.
Yeah, like the moon cycle, or you know I would know, oh, okay, I'm PMSing, so this is the next phase and this is the next phase, and you get your cycle, and then a couple of days later you feel this sense of your skin feels better and your body feels better and you're cleansing, and then it was just something to count on, something that you knew, and
Hmm.
sudden it's gone.
Back to structure again. Yeah, nature.
Yeah, you're not quite sure. Yeah, it's just learning a new way of being, I guess.
Is there a
And
kind of grief with that, of
yeah,
sort of almost watching an old self die
yeah,
before the new self is birthed? Yeah.
yeah. It really 100%. And yeah, those feeling, and then the physical ailments of it, all of a sudden your skin is saggier, you don't have as much muscle, or you've lost muscle and you're weaker and not as resilient. And so all of those things that go along with that as
Did you
well. So
find that was a real thing? Like suddenly you're picking up the hay bale and thinking, "Whoa, this feels heavier."
yeah, for me, it's the muscle, my muscles and legs and things like that. And that could be contributing just also from being exhausted too.
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your strategies? Let's structure them out. So the strategies first for the hormonal side, because with this is coming emotional, right? Hormone is emotion. And then let's go to the physical. I think this is so useful for people to have a really
Hmm.
frank discussion about this because you're not going to stop. You're going to be doing this until
Yeah.
drop, right? So you've got, and I think so many of our listeners who are in the same boat, they're like, okay, I'm menopause, I'm dealing with burnout, but my practice is bigger than it's ever been.
Hmm.
This is a measure of success. All right, what are my strategies then? So let's go to and I know menopause is different for everybody, so it's a bit like autism, it's different in every person, right? But what are your strategies emotionally? Like beyond the loss of, okay, the menstrual cycle and an identity, but
Hmm.
or at least navigation, as you said. But what are the other emotional impacts, and how do you deal with those?
Hmm. Being aware, like I was aware that I wasn't right, but it wasn't enough almost to, because I still couldn't stop. And then that would exasperate everything. But for me now, being coming out of the burnout at this point, it's just being more mindful and telling, like, it's retraining your brain really. And so, because you can ruminate so much on stuff and it just gets worse and worse. So stopping and being aware of your thoughts and trying to change that negative chatter, but you have to have the strength to do that too. So, and I don't know, gosh, how, I guess I got so far down that I had to do something to bring myself back up. So I personally had to try a different medication for a bit that helped my brain sort
Mm,
of spark again, if you will.
mm,
And that snapped me out enough to be able to take that step back.
mm,
And I just started becoming more positive, and I started having those conversations in my brain that were more positive and more like me again, because
right.
I'm a I'm a person that sees the glass half full.
Mm.
I was not. I was seeing the glass half empty.
That must have been quite shocking. Yeah.
It's scary. It was very scary. And so, yeah, being open to trying something different, whether it's, you know, medication for a bit or going to a naturopath. I don't know, but there becomes a point where you know that if you don't do something, then you're just going to go downhill, and then nothing's good for anybody or anything anymore.
Did you also get to a point where you could reach out to help?
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it I had to reach out to my family doctor and my friends and support group and family, and that had to be a combination of a few things.
Yeah. It's very difficult when you've been leading, for so long
Yeah.
because the worry is, I think for all of us is when we ask if someone else will step forward, that unless we're leading by example the whole time,
Yeah.
you know, people will lose their own momentum. Have you actually found that that's not true? Have you found that asking your team to step up more has actually been galvanizing for them?
Yes. So I was speaking about Olivia, who is basically our manager right now, and she just one of our staff went on maternity leave, and so it was time for Liv to step up, and she took it and ran with it. And I feel so fortunate to have a young person, like she's just turning 25, a young person like that, to have so much like energy and inspiration and hard work, and they're hard to find now. And
They
so
are.
you know she's a godsend for me, and I don't tell her enough, but I see I see her being she can be successful in this industry because of that, and there's just not very many people out there like that. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. It's,
Definitely.
do you think, listening to you talk, I'm starting to talk more and more about burnout when we're doing the horse boy
Mhm.
trainings, and telling people, look, you're gonna burn out. In fact, if you think about your 24-hour cycle, you actually burn out every day. There's a point at which you fall unconscious, right? You actually could not stay awake and working if you tried. And if you pushed yourself through that, it would just lead to insanity.
Mhm.
But in our sort of, particularly our Protestant Anglo-Saxon culture, this idea of to be the constant workhorse, that work ethic is so instilled in us that when the inevitable burnouts happen, we feel ashamed, we feel it shouldn't be happening, we try to fight it. And more now I'm telling people, expect it and plan for it.
Yeah.
And actually learn what is your burnout cycle. Like I think I have a 6 weekly burnout cycle myself, because I travel a lot, I'm on planes a lot, I'm on jet lag a lot. Then when I'm home, there's large livestock and we've got clients and blah blah blah, and I got young kids and blah 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 blah, and of course there's going to be burnout. And it used to be that I wouldn't even allow the topic to come up. And then I'd notice myself like hitting the bottle and
Yeah.
being like really grumpy and not being nice, and people pointing it out to me, and me like not wanting to hear that at all. And then at a certain point, kind of going, oh, actually, shit, you're right. Okay. What am I going to do about that? And I started doing things that I never did before. So, for example, I take naps. I use yoga nidra a lot. Have you
Yeah.
come across yoga nidra? The guided,
A
it's
little bit.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
So guided meditations where you basically lie with your eyes closed. You don't
Yeah.
have to sit in some uncomfortable pose. And basically what you do is you just go through a body scan of being aware of these different parts of your body.
Mhm.
And there's no wrong way to do it. So if you fall asleep, it's fine. And but it's they call it non-sleep deep relaxation. It's like a deep rest that where 15 minutes can be like you just slept tonight. And just beginning to sort of let myself even just be comfortable with the fact that I'm tired meant that
Yeah.
I could.
It's not a weakness.
Exactly. But we were all brought up, to see
Especially
it as that.
I find like even with Ron, like if he's feeling physically tired, or
Mm,
his back is sore, like it for me it's like it affects him so much more.
mm.
I'm assuming it's like a sign of, weakness, and it's not. It's just your body's telling you something.
Right. And if you've gone it as hard physically, as you and Ron have, in the course of, say, the last 20 years or so, how can there not be, a
Yeah.
point at which your body just says, dude, come on. And it's also got to be hard for a guy like Ron, because I know him. He's a big, strong dude. He's very capable. He's got all those skills. He's used to being the guy with the skills and the guy with the strength and the guy, and to feel a kind of wobble in that is very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So as you move forward now, because your program is bigger than it's ever been, as you say, you've
Mhm.
got 100 animals and you've got, 4 turkeys in your life, as well as, all the horses and so on.
Yeah.
How are you reorganizing everything so that this is now sustainable for you personally?
Definitely trying now to figure out like how is this going to run without me?
Okay,
Because when
succession plan. Yeah.
I have to, and it is a community organization. Like we are a charity, not one person that's supposed to own it, right?
Hmm.
You have a board, and we do things a little differently, but we basically have picked our board, and we're all on the same page and get things done. But preparing for the future as to my goals right now are to make things more efficient. There's still a lot of things lacking on the farm, like just proper fencing and proper ways of making it easier to feed the animals, and not having all the goats eating the pigs' food, even though it's all the same. But
Right.
goats are
Goats, yeah. They're
and
great social animals, but they are a pain in the ass,
I
yeah.
it's they're wonderful, but when it comes to feeding, it's mayhem. And just those things figured out, and you know so it's not frustrating. Every day isn't frustrating when it's time to feed and having those actions going on. And so those are my main goals moving forward, and still expanding our programs. I don't want to create a whole like that many more new programs or anything. I think we have a good core core things that we're doing that are working, but becoming a little more fluent for me, I would like to get back to doing a bit more of the communication type pieces with the horses from the ground, and just
Mhm.
more about their body language, learning more about what they're communicating back to us, and
Mm.
being to share that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things which, people often assume with horse sport is that because it's a mounted program, we're spending all our time in the saddle, and actually, all the preparation for it is on the ground. You know,
Yeah,
we are constantly doing groundwork with our horses so that when we're in the saddle with someone else's kid, we know it's going to flow, but that flow actually comes from time spent on the ground with the horse rather
right.
than time spent in the saddle. And this is often, I think, not looked at enough in therapy programs. If they're ground based, the horse doesn't get enough exercise. Someone actually should be riding them and trail riding them and taking them out in the world and giving them an interesting time. But that doesn't have to be you. That can be another staff member, you know,
Yeah.
or they love to jump or they love to go crazy, but they can be free jumped. There's so many ways to do that kind of thing, to give them the outlet for that energy. And at the same time, the people that are very riding focused often don't spend enough time on the ground. So often it seems to be about having a team where you've got people who have their various likes and preferences, and then you can sort of divide the well-being of the horse up into those chunks so that people aren't doing the thing that scares them or that they don't
Mhm.
really like to do or bores them or whatever. So much it is about tribe and team, I feel. You know, the having spent time in Mongolia with actual horse tribes, you sort of see how it's always a big extended family endeavor. Horses are complex, particularly in those climates, and you deal with this climate yourself. I want to go back to the winter, and I know winter is a great time for burnout in Canada when you have to be outside in it all the time. I worked as a window cleaner as an illegal immigrant in Montreal through the winter, and pwah, yeah, but I was 21. I mean, imagine doing it at 50 something. But how do you keep your horses, and how do you go through the winter with your horses?
Yes. So our horses are out 24/7. They have shelters in the fields that you would think they would use more than they do.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll go in there in and out, but it's not always because the weather is bad. So like we've just never had I grew up boarding my horse. Like I got a horse when I was 12, and she was in a stall and then turned out during the day and then sort of brought back in. And that's how I just knew horses were just in a stall. But when we moved to our property here and I could finally get horses back in my life, we didn't have a barn. So, of course, they had a shelter. And I learned from that experience that they're pretty happy to be able to come and go as they please. And, we have hay available 24/7. So, they're not worried about when their next meal is coming, which creates less stress for them.
Mm.
And we feel when our horses come in to do a session or to do some work or for a brush or for whatever reason, we feel that allowing them to go back out and mingle with their herd and be a part of that equine system, if you will, is the best thing we can do for them.
I so agree. It's really interesting. We obviously I've been through all these different ways of keeping horses. When I was a boy, we kept our horses out all the time in England, except in the winter they came in at night, because they were hunters. They were going to be clipped, so they were wearing rugs, but then we'd bring them in at night for warmth,
Yep.
but they were outside in their herd all day, and that was just very normal. Then, of course, in Texas, well, we just had a 24/7 outside climate. Horses needed shade; they go into shelters for the shade, but we had them, living outside with shelters, and they loved that. Then when I moved to Germany, we spent the last several years in Germany. It was really interesting. We had to board the horses. And I'd always been very kind of, oh yes, well, you've got to keep your horses out, blah, blah, blah. And it was the first time, because we couldn't just like show up and buy a farm. The kids were very young and so on. So we were like, okay, let's board the horses. It'll be easier for us in these years because we need to give a lot of attention to infant children. And Germans are people who love rules and regulations and structure. And so the summer was very easy because the horses were out most of the time. But the winter, they don't put the horses on the fields because they don't want to see a lot of mud. I grew up in England. It's like, yeah, mud. I mean, it's just we invented mud. It's like, awards for the muddiest farm. So you got those Monty Python things about, oh, have some nice mud. Would you like a bit of mud with your mud? But then suddenly with them, mud's not allowed. So what they would do is they would put the horses out for maybe 2 hours a day in what they called a paddock. And the paddock was just like this sterile area of sand. They're sure they could stand out there in a group. They didn't even have a free hay thing. And I looked at this and kind of went, what are we going to do? These horses are standing in like 22 hours a day. Then they're just being put out. Okay, we're working them as well. So let's shave a couple of hours off there. It's not enough. What do we do? So I thought, okay, this gives me a lot of compassion for people suddenly who are having to keep horses in this way because they may not have a choice. They live in the outskirts of a town. That's the only thing available, and then you're at the mercy of the barn owner. So we came up with this idea of crazy time, where we spent a lot of time letting horses free jump in groups, in herds, inside covered arenas or open arenas with better footing. And we found that went an awful long way. And then we'd like go in the forest in the day and we'd like ride one lead two and let them like gallop on. Anything we could do to like give them their endorphins and give them their social time but like we had to put so much effort into it. Then we rented a place where we could just keep them 24/7 outside again with just shelters exactly as you described. And Germany gets a bit of a Canadian winter, not quite as bad, but we certainly get quite a few weeks of like deep ice snow if you're at
Yep.
a certain altitude. And we found that the horses, of course, just thrived. And if you think about the steppe in Mongolia, that's exactly what you find, isn't it? You've got like really hot summers, but like massively cold winters. And this is where the
Yeah.
horse comes from. This is what horses are actually adapted to. So
Yeah.
it's intriguing to me that you found that actually there in Canada, even with the snowy climate, the horses really are totally okay with this. Yeah,
That we do blanket the ones that need it,
absolutely. Yeah.
but we have one Oberon. I mean, he's American cream draft and Lusitano mix,
Ooh,
and
that sounds quite
the big boy,
intriguing.
and like we've never blanketed him. He doesn't need it. He doesn't want it.
Yeah,
And
sometimes they tear the blanket off. Yeah.
we put a rain sheet on him, and he's also the lead guy out there, right? So we put a rain sheet on him, and it freaked the entire herd out. I had to take it off.
That's funny.
Yeah, they didn't know who he was. It was like it was funny. Yeah.
Do you do you find that that is a growing thing in Canada now that people are actually trusting a little bit more to nature? Because certainly when I was living there, people were very much about putting the horses up in the barns through the winter. Is it beginning to change?
I believe so. And it's also depending on what you're doing with your horse and where you're boarding it. So,
Absolutely.
definitely there's boarding facilities out there where people can you pay extra, but your horse has a stall, or you pay less and they're out with other horses 24/7. So it just depends on what you're doing.
It seems to be more and more that it's about the herd structures that
Yeah.
really it brings about the well-being for the horses. And as much as I do these trainings going around different countries, different places, one of the things I see in the more old school types of therapeutic riding center is lack of equine well-being
Yes.
because these herd structures are ignored. I was actually very pleasantly surprised. I went and did a training earlier this year in Michigan, which is sort of, as American, as Canadian as you can be while being an American, or as American as you can be while being a Canadian. There's an interesting hybrid of people there. It's like, you guys are kind of like Canadians. They're kind of cool, But this is a Path International Center. I'm used to the Path International places having these
Yep.
very rigid structures, and the horses are all in stalls all the time, and often, frankly, not very happy, and often a bit stiff and arthritic, and not looked after in that way, despite the fact that there's often a lot of good infrastructure and all these safety protocols. But this place, it's called Renew, had they built this barn and then realized actually the horses don't really want to be in here, and so they just gotten all these really cool outdoor paddocks with these horses all in their different herd structures, and even in their climate, and the resulting equine well-being that I was seeing mentally, emotionally, as well as physically was just much more like what I'd see in a horse workplace, frankly.
Hmm.
Do
Hmm.
you do you help other people in their getting their therapeutic things off the ground? Do you sort of advise people now, sort of a little bit on lead
I
structures and such?
I haven't yet, but I feel it's something in the last year or so I've been thinking more about, you know what? Like I have enough wisdom now, I feel that I could be
Mm.
sharing stuff to make it easier for other people to try and do something similar.
No,
you know.
I agree. I agree. And what I think something else that, what's come up through this conversation, I didn't expect us to, be talking about burnout and menopause and so on, but this is actually so important.
Hmm.
Because if you don't have well-being, or the horse doesn't have well-being, how can you possibly transmit that to somebody
Well,
else, right?
and that's why we started all of these things were for to help people with their well-being. And so
It's like
yeah.
physician, heal thyself. But
Yeah.
so I feel that, one of the things I'd love to see from you would be a series of courses or trainings
Hmm.
really directed at people running these types of businesses who are
Yeah.
female, but also male. There's a sort of male menopause too. You can't really call it that, but you know what I mean. As people hit
Oh,
middle age, and
yeah.
the various things that can come up, to really say having, and I think for that, if you were to sort of structure again that word out some sort of course that people could do, you yourself have to have gone through it and felt the despair, right?
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, what have you got to offer? What do you, when would you say you arrived at that point of despair?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
What?
was terrified. I was terrified.
Exactly. Talk us through that. Like, did it suddenly catch you by surprise? That was there suddenly like a realization? And what what did your inner voice say when when you hit that realization? So answer those two things if you would. So first thing is at what point did you notice that you really were actually not just unhappy, not just depressed, not just tired, not just but actually despairing? Maybe just go with that one first. At what point did you realize that?
Within the last year, just feeling like I was spinning out of control, not making good decisions, like I felt like I was vibrating at
Good
a level,
decisions with the people, good decisions with your livestock generally, like
all of
what?
everything,
Okay.
everything in myself, how was reacting to things.
Find you were getting kind of mean.
Oh, yeah, I was getting mean. I did not feel nice. No,
Mm.
I wasn't
And
being,
did you notice that at the time, or were you just so into it that you were kind of blind to it?
I was aware of it and questioning it all the time. Like, why am I
Okay.
feeling angry? This is not me.
Yeah. 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 And then at a certain point, you went, okay, I got to do something about this. I got to walk the talk that I'm saying to my clients. If you were to give advice to somebody who's hitting that, and I bet you so many people listening to this are hitting that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
so honest of you. I've got so much respect for you, Susie, for because we could have just had a big conversation about how successful your program is, and it is. What we mustn't lose sight of is that through this whole burnout thing, you never like dropped the ball. You kept it going. You fulfilled your obligations and so forth. And again, so many of the women listening, I think, are in that position where they are doing that. But okay, so you reach that thing, you say, okay, shit, I'm not myself. I'm being kind of mean as this, not me. This is not Susie. And you're right. I know you having not hung out that long, but the interactions we had, this is a very sunny, positive person, as you said, a glass half full person, which is, of course, why you got the whole thing off the ground in the first place. And of course, Ron is that way too.
Yes.
But so did I know you said okay, you said okay to stop to this to that, but can you go into just a little bit more detail? If you were going to give like a training to another woman in your position a year from now, what would you say? Well, like what are the steps? Like really, what are the steps to like get through this, survive it, and get back to thriving?
Woo! That's a hard one because, I do things so differently. I don't,
Oh,
if I could go back and change a few things of how it all started, and just
let's start there. That's perfect. Let's start there.
having a bit more of a plan, not being running things so much on a whim. And in that,
Structure.
yes, there is a lot of sacrifice. And I sacrificed a lot, but then I also expected the people around me to sacrifice things too, which is Ron, my family. Like this farm became our lifestyle, which I was okay with, but not always, Ron may not have always been, like it's he's formed around it and been a part of it, but I'm not even answering your question right now.
Well, no, but this is a free flow, though. I mean, and I
Yeah,
just fired this at you, and I think we're arriving
yeah,
towards an answer, right? When you
absolutely.
say, let's just back to your opening statement there. You said you've had more of a plan. What would have
Yes.
been in that plan?
Well, I didn't know, like at that point, I didn't know Heal with Horses was going to be what it is today, like at all. And
You didn't know how big it was going to get.
no, I didn't, I didn't know that small animals were going to be a part. I didn't know, that we would expand on the horses as much as we have. I didn't know what program. I didn't know we would have a mobile component.
Ah, yes. We haven't talked about your mobile
So
component. I do talk about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
so those little things are beautiful that came out of it. But maybe going back and just having somewhat of a plan, to start with, like I didn't know how to get charitable status. We didn't know anything. We didn't know how to have a board. We didn't know. It was just learning all of those things as we go.
Right.
And to be able to go back and do, what would you recommend to someone to, not do some of those things so that you don't arrive in such a burned out spot. Having more money,
Right.
nice, Rupert, having a little bit more of some finances to go into something like this with, um,
Mm.
would certainly cut down a lot of the stress. But I mean, I don't know. But then at the same time, like this is the way that my life went with it. It doesn't always have to be that for someone else, right?
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
I wonder if what you're arriving at here is a mentorship component.
Yeah.
20 years ago when we were sort of getting into this was a very young field, and I think we all got into it organically. Obviously, I did, it was never my intention, but obviously it happened to me, and then, you go with it. So I think people like you and I had to kind of react and roll with a sort of organic evolutionary process.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone was to come to us now and say, "Oh, Rue or Susie, I would like to do this," how should I proceed? I think you'd be in a very good position to say, "Well,
Yeah.
here would be some good structures. Here's some mistakes that we made.
Yeah.
Actually, out of these mistakes, some good things happened. But you know, perhaps you could mitigate some stress by trying to grow in these particular ways. Here are some pitfalls to avoid, etc." None of us had that, coming, because who really could have mentored us? Because when you and I were coming in, there was Path International, there was Cantra up where you were. They were running these very kind of almost sort of military,
Yeah.
types of outfit, which we knew was not going to work for our population. People that don't follow top-down instruction, people that need a much freer follow the child approach. So we weren't going to get that kind of mentorship. Now, where I was so fortunate was I got, because I directly reached out for it, but all the mentorship I got from Temple Grandin about how to proceed, and that's of course where follow the child comes from. It's not some idea that Rupert Isaacson had. It really came from mentorship from Temple, and actually probably you could argue from her mother, who came up with it. You could actually argue that horseboy method and movement method are largely driven by the efforts and researches of Temple Grandin's mother back in the 1950s. But the we yeah, our field was just very young. If you were going to talk to your younger Susie, go back 20 years, what would you tell her to do?
Well, I would still tell her to listen to her gut and trust it. I know
Mm.
that's, you
Hmm.
know, honor, know as much about yourself as you can. I know that's difficult too because you haven't gone through a lot of the experiences yet, and be true to your authenticity. I mean, I'm a born introvert and learned how to
Oh,
be an
interesting.
I learned how
Okay.
to be an for a very, very long time.
Mm.
Understanding those two things and knowing, oh, I'm feeling overstimulated, and
Okay.
that's a cue to perhaps getting some solitude and taking that time to breathe and ground again, or whatever you need to do, because being out in the public all the time, and even if it's on a farm and you're managing other people, you're still on, and when it's at your own home, it's hard to have those boundaries, if you will.
Mm.
So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. I mean, most of us have to grow our practices out of our home places.
Hmm.
And it's interesting having done both. I've had the experience of, my practice being out of my house, out of my farm, and also my practice being at another farm and me having a house away. And I'd say there's pros and cons to both. But if they are on your farm, as you say, it's really important that you can find some territory of solitude
Yeah.
where at least people would only come in by invitation. I think that's important, sort of looking at that, because it's really difficult, as you know, like when we were first starting at New Trails, there wasn't a bathroom unless you came into the house. So it's just something simple like that. You can't deny someone the bathroom, and then next thing you know, they're sat at your kitchen table and people are sat there forever. Yeah. So
Amazing.
you are running workshops out of where you are.
Hmm.
And so how do you do that when you got burnout?
Exactly. I haven't been doing them very much in the last couple.
Do you feel
So
ready to go back to them?
yes,
Okay. Would you do them from your home now, or would you look for another space?
I don't have to do them in my home.
Okay.
We have the clubhouse down there.
You have a clubhouse. Okay.
Yeah, that's in front of we have a dome, a white riding dome with the end walls, and it's like one of those fabric
Okay.
spaces. And then, so the clubhouse is basically 50 by, what is it? 50 feet long by about 15 feet wide. And so we have a space that we can use in there. And then we have outdoor spaces as well.
Yeah. No, I,
Yeah.
I, I hear you on all this. I think there's a learning curve that everyone has to go through where you do it in a way that perhaps isn't optimal because you can't wait for conditions to be perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, when is the right time to have a child, or when is the right time to start a business? Or there's never a right time. So you just got to do it and
Yeah.
you'll learn, but it might be more or less stressful. Yes. It's intriguing to me that you say you're an introvert that's learned how to be an extrovert, because I'd say I'm the same.
Oh, yes.
I can absolutely project a very confident smokescreen, and I have to. I mean, it's not that it's just life requires it.
Yeah.
But as you say, there is a cost, and so if you don't try to balance it out with these periods of solitude. Weirdly, I find plane rides really relaxing. I'm often doing long hauls, between Europe and North America, and it's like 8 hours,
Yeah.
no
You're like,
talking.
oh, else.
So, it's like I'm good,
Yeah.
and I often come off. I get jet lag, but I often come off quite refreshed spiritually, just
Yeah.
because there's been time
Sure.
to go
You're able
internal.
to
I
reflect. Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so something that you said, which I think is quite innovative, you've got this mobile unit.
Yes.
I love that because we used to do a lot of that in the early years of Horseboy. We would take our animals out to schools, to autism facilities resident. We'd even go into the parks in Austin with our horses and just with a horse trailer, unbox and start playing with the ponies and seeing who wanted to come up, or and even in Germany, actually, what I started doing, particularly when we were at this boarding facility, and I knew we had people that you just could not keep safe around that. So I would say to their group or their parent, meet me in the forest. There's a car park like over there. I will be there at 11 o'clock with two horses,
Yeah.
and learn to use those environments of public spaces. So tell me about I think not enough people do this kind of thing, and people get very stuck on their own properties. Tell me about your mobile unit.
Well, it came about actually quite a few years back in a smaller scale where we get invited to bring animals to the Lavender Festival over the weekend and blah blah blah. But we wrote a grant and got some funding, and it bought us a little van that we could put the animals in, and then paid for us to go out into some nursing homes in our community. So that's how it started. And it's
Nursing homes are where you tend to do your mobile unit.
yeah, yeah. So that's how that began. And so it's just, and now, there we have enough of a rapport that sometimes families will ask us to come and bring the animals for their child's birthday, or we've been as far as Ottawa University, where they've had us come in and during exams and bring the animals into the library to give the students a bit of a break. And I might just say, we've brought a piglet,
What a great
bunnies.
idea. Who came up with that idea? That's a great idea.
I know. Well, they contacted us, and we did it twice one year, and we were at Queen's University just in October, and they had us come in for their alumni event in October in the fall. And again, and because so people are realizing that animals are helping people's well-being, even if it's just like a lot of the time they have dogs walking around the airports and stuff, or a pig or something like that, just to offer some comic relief and a bit of stress relief. So, but it's
100%.
yeah.
When you're going into the old people's homes, how
Mhm.
how do you do it?
In the summertime, like in the spring and the summer, if they have a garden, we'll do it out there. But the last few times, the one nursing home, we have a little coon piglet right now named Bridget, and she is a star. She's the cutest little thing you can imagine. She's like a bull in a china shop. And she just walks in with everybody. And like, as soon as you scratch her, she flops. So there's pictures of her just with the residents, like in their wheelchairs, just bending over, scratching her. And we bring little like back scratchers and stuff so that they can reach the animals better. We bring our goats, the bunnies. Yeah, we can fit the mini horses in that little minivan as well. We don't do that as often, but we have brought them to places as well. So it's pretty
What
cool.
do what do you find is the reaction? What does it bring out of people in those nurses?
Well, specifically in the seniors' homes, you'll get them like they'll have memories like from, and it's fantastic. Sorry, my dogs, because they're actually talking about when they were younger and if they lived on a farm and how the animals made them feel, and it's rekindling like nice memories and nice feelings for them. So it's pretty awesome.
Do stories come out?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you give
Lots
us
of
an example? Does anything spring to mind?
Oh, jeepers, I haven't been doing them as much, so I can't think of any specific stories offhand. But just really just the experiences of like quite a few times of you know they'll be holding the bunny and petting the bunny, and they'll have a bunny story come up, or oh, I used to have bunnies, or I used to live on a farm, and I would be the ones tasked to, feed the chickens or get the eggs or, feed the pigs. And, we used to have pigs when I grew up. And it also sparks a lovely conversation and communication piece where,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's what I think it seems to spark is neuroplasticity. And, one of the difficulties with the way we view aging in our society is we put old people in like old people parking lots.
yeah,
And when these are the people who've got all the wisdom, and, in any other human system in the world, the elders are respected, treasured, looked after, consulted with, because they're your repository of a lifetime of information that you need. And here in the West, we just park them. And of course, when the brain is parked, the body is parked, the brain gets parked, and the brain starts to, you know, not do what it should. So one of the
read.
things which that's why I was intrigued about if stories come out, because I've definitely seen mobile units at work, and I wish there were more people in our field doing the mobile units with the small
Yeah,
animals, because often stories come out even with people who seem to have retreated into dementia, and then suddenly, really lucidly, you will get a story about, a particular time in their life that might have a real resonance to the family. And
hmm,
maybe this family has lost that type of communication with that person. And then suddenly you can retrieve a bank of memories and stories that become part of the family lore
yeah,
and bring that person back to life in the eyes of the family where they might have sort of written them off. And then also sometimes healing of trauma. I don't know if you listened, but we did a podcast a few weeks ago with my friend Gitti Berghoff, who runs an amazing program in Germany. And she used to actually be a dementia nurse before got into the whole equine thing. And she talks about how the sense of looking a bunny or scratching a pig, or even like with a ball of wool or something, sparking memories. And some of these memories that were coming up were from the war and of people who'd really gone through some pretty terrible things as civilians and had to kind of push them down, horrible
yeah,
things when the Russians invaded, that sort of thing, you can imagine. And the stories of that coming up bringing a kind of a healing, which maybe they'd sat on that story for 50 or 60 years. So I'm a great believer in the mobile units going out, particularly to the very young and the very old. But and then also the same group, they're called Green Care Farm, then in Munster in Germany. In the local school, which was doing movement method, someone made a bomb threat or in a school shooting threat. It was a school that was overwhelmed with Russian and Ukrainian refugees, and of course they're fighting. And this freaked everyone out. And so they brought all of their animals into the school. And it completely changed the dynamic.
mm,
So I often think that that's actually some of the best work that people in our field can do. Is that something that you will expand, do you think?
yeah. I would love, yeah, anything like that. The education system is just, well, in Canada, it's struggling. Big time. My sisters are
Show
both
me a place where it isn't. Yeah.
my sisters are both teachers, and my dad's a retired teacher, and my mom was in the education system as well. So I just hear from my sisters how chaotic it is, and you know, and behaviors and how they handle them and or how they're supposed to handle them. And I feel like jeepers, all you just bring an animal into the classroom and
Mm,
it change the tone like immediately.
it does. It's like a shamanic
Yeah,
effect. It seems to bring out, put everyone on the top of their game somehow. I agree. Now, of course, if you do more mobile unit, then you have to be more extroverted. So is that something that you might then, now having gone through the burnout cycle, delegate to another staff member?
delegate most of that. Yes, it's usually, I'm not usually going and heading them up now. So yeah.
Is
Can't,
that kind of what your advice would be to people hitting that mid-career thing with what we do is just start learning to delegate?
yes. And that's never been my forte. So, but yeah, you have to. You have to now.
How do you do it?
Well, I mean, I have Liv, or I have that I can do that with, and she takes a lot of that off my plate for me.
Yeah.
You know, she was a McDonald's manager, and I swear, and Emma, our assistant manager, was also worked for McDonald's as a manager, and they got it going on. Like, they know how to delegate. They know how
Well, they
to.
have a system, right? They get given a system within that franchise, don't they? Like you don't have to like figure out how to run a McDonald's. They tell you how to run the
Yes,
McDonald's. Yeah.
they've applied that elsewhere in their lives now.
Mm,
You know, for this position or for, you know, whatever they're going into. I think there's been more. I have another staff that was also a manager.
is that the golden rule? Is the golden rule is look to the golden arch when you're hiring your staff?
They were taught to organize. And you know, like, I've worked in the restaurant business and serving industry as well, and it does teach you, like, you know, you have to have a process, and you
Mm,
know, you're picking up a plate off the table and there's another plate there or a glass or something else on another table and you have room to take that too, then you do it,
yeah.
right? And it's so, yes, having the key people that are engaged in what we're doing and love it for the same reasons you do, which isn't always easy to find. Like, that's so important in the delegating realm.
What do you do? This is another thing which I think a lot of us face is okay. It's very easy to say, well, when I was young, we worked harder than the current generation. And of course, I heard the previous generation to me saying that. But I do feel that there's a fragility and a lower resilience in general in the current young person. It's something to do with social media. It's something to do with
It
the
really,
feeling that solutions can come really fast when actually they can't, and you have to, you know, but whatever. I find it is definitely getting harder to find the younger people who can do this. I mean,
yeah.
McDonald's must be finding this too, but yet they seem to be thriving. Yeah, where do you, and I'm used to thinking of Canadians as very hardworking people because, in a very hardworking period of my life, I was living in Canada and
Yeah.
surrounded by hardworking Canadians, like your husband and you.
Yes.
What are you doing in terms of, yeah, trying to find those people who still have that grit?
We we haven't actually looked. They've come, which is
Okay.
so, like, as I said, oh, and we've gone through many. We've gone through many staff changes,
Yeah,
and
sure.
they're hard to find and they're hard to keep because, you know, your pay scale isn't always as high, especially, like, I'm the biggest volunteer ever
Yeah.
in this organization. People have to be paid, and not always knowing if you can afford that within
Mm,
your organization. But then now I'm on this train where I'm just going to write as many grants as I can, and then use that as a model for the years coming. I would
yeah.
always task grants to somebody else, and not always, just in the last couple of years, and we weren't getting enough in. So
Okay.
now, I'm back on that.
Where
And
does one look for grants in Canada or in Ontario?
well, like, we have a number that will come right from our community. So applying for those ones and getting they're not always like a huge amount, but, and then There now now with AI, it's a lot easier to find the ones that you couldn't necessarily find
Are
before.
there grants that come from government in Canada?
There are grants that come from government, but we are not government funded, so they would have to be like the Ontario Trillium Foundation, or the Trillium Foundation is a big government one. That, and there's other ones available that come up, but depending on what kind of organization you are and whether your mandate fits those grants or another.
Hmm. But
Or
you
an,
find that you can actually fund yourself to a large degree through grant writing. Okay.
yeah. And finally we're at a point where, you know, we could make a business plan now.
Yes.
We could now and kind of know.
Will?
I might over the winter.
Yeah. Well, I feel as you know, we're sort of approaching the 2 hour mark here. It's really what I love is that this conversation did not go where I expected it to go, but I went where I think it needs to go,
Mm-hmm.
which is that we do have to realize that we are the client as well as we are the service user as well as the service provider.
That's right.
Um, And perhaps the thing about the burnout thing is it keeps you honest, right? It keeps you from getting into dynamic that, oh, I am the therapist, I am the one who has it all, together, and you are the
Yep.
one who needs help, And when you
Yep.
find just like, nope.
No.
I can't imagine it can do anything but make you better at what you do, Susie, because
Yeah.
clearly, Heal with Horses has just gone from success to success.
Yeah. We can't always measure, and that's another thing I've had to come to terms with is I it's hard not to measure success in a society that measures monetary financial as being successful. Like
Yeah.
it's only successful if
Yes.
you can pay yourself lots of money and things like that. So for me, it's coming to terms with starting something that is very successful and has helped hundreds and thousands of people and animals,
Yeah.
and not to always, I'm okay with it, but it's like when I see people looking back at me, you know how you do that kind of, or talking to somebody, or you've met somebody and you kind of like see them, like what are they seeing when they're looking back at me?
Do you think they see anything other than just a self-actualized woman who has made a great go of doing a business that heals people? I mean, I can't imagine that anyone looks at you through any kind of critical eye for saying, well, you should be making the same money that a lawyer makes or something.
Yeah.
Do you
I
really
just,
think that people are judging you like that?
I don't, no, not necessarily. I guess it's my own judgment.
Yeah.
You're right. It's my own judgment. I would like to be able to contribute more financially to our home and but I've just done it in a different way.
Well,
So,
here's a little exercise we could go through because I bet you that you're not the only person running a program who has this feeling.
mm-hmm.
So bear with me here.
Okay.
I know that what I'm about to say is going to make you have a knee-jerk reaction. So I'm not going to tell you to not have the knee-jerk reaction. I just want you to notice that knee-jerk reaction and see if you can not stay there too long, right? So have it, but then go kind of, oh, well, there's that knee-jerk reaction that's, part of my conditioning. But I don't, okay, what's my next thought? Let's just go. So what if, and I want all you people who are listening and watching this to perhaps do this with us. What if enormous financial success is about to come through doing what you do, or through something completely unexpected. It could come from either. And to just say, I am open to the possibility that this could be the case.
Mm-hmm.
And just try that thought on.
Yeah.
And you don't have to think, well, how would that be? What can I do? Or do I need to have some, online program or something? Just, I'm open to a feeling of absolute financial ease from whatever source. And now we take it to the next level, which is, do you feel a slight sense of discomfort in the base of your throat as we talk about this? Or in your chest somewhere? Or...
Yeah, maybe a little in my
Yeah.
throat.
Okay, that would be normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to now dive into that discomfort for about 6 seconds. It's not much, right? What I
Mm-hmm.
want you to do is think, well, but how on earth can that happen, Rupert? How can I resolve my financial quandary and still deliver what I do? And as you ask that question, I want you to breathe in through your nose, and we're going to hold it till it gets a little bit uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do something like that with my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to let it go, give it to God with like a shout, a roar. I'll do it along with you because it's always a good thing to do. So sorry, listeners, this is going to startle you in a moment. And then we just give it to God and let it go and let the universe sort it out. All right. So, first thing now, feel that discomfort at the base of your throat. Now, you're going to breathe in through the nose and really hold that question till it feels like you kind of want to cry. So, here we go. Okay. It's taken care of.
It's
Somebody
actually
showed me that one a while ago and it's worked. It's really worked.
it's one thing that I do believe when I'm feeling like unsuccessful, or why do I keep doing this, or I just want to throw in the white flag, like, or
Yeah.
but I always know that the universe will provide, and for whatever reason, going through the difficulties and the challenges are all part of it's all part of the work. And I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have the support from spirit or the universe or what have you. So it has provided. I mean, it's not like we haven't gotten a lot of what we need to make something like this successful when starting it on a thin dime with absolutely no plan.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we had this conversation. I'm grateful to you, not just for the work you do, but for putting a spotlight on this very, very real
Well,
side
there's
of what we
a,
do. Yeah.
a very big human aspect in what we do as humans, and like that's so important to talk about what we did today.
Yeah, it is.
because it's not talked about enough. It's sometimes only talked about, the good things and the positive things about all the lives you help change and bring positivity to. But it does come as at an expense to yourself sometimes, That's real and that's reality.
I'd like the listeners and viewers, could you, if you're going to comment perhaps below, if you're say watching this on YouTube or so, tell us what your challenges have been with this work and what you've done to mitigate them, because I think we need a sort of technology bank of this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, for sure, we want this field to expand. It has to. The need has never been greater. So as the new generation come in, we need to prepare them.
Yes.
So please do what Suzie has done and share your experience. Suzie, it's been so brave and honest of you. I have so much respect for you. Really, I cannot quite put into words how humbled I feel by your absolute candor here and yeah, the bravery it takes to come on a public forum and really talk completely real, but from a place of love. I'm just very grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rupert. I'm glad we could share this.
Yeah, likewise. And I hope we can cross paths also with Ron,
Uh,
perhaps, sooner than the next 15 years. Maybe we need to do a gig. Maybe we need to do a clinic or a workshop or something at yours again. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not sure. Should we figure that out for next year, maybe?
100%. I would love that.
It's been so long since I was in Canada. Yeah, okay, I'd love to.
Okay.
And again, my friend, just thank you so much. Truly,
You
truly, truly. You've actually given me strength by talking about this, so thank you.
gotten a lot myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, from this.
All right, I'll let you go and introvert now. Okay. Oh, before we haven't even gone, how do people find you on the web and all that stuff?
Oh,
Donate and all of that.
yeah, healwithhorses.ca.
Healwithhorses.ca.
Our
And
website. We're on Facebook, Instagram. What is our Instagram? Heal with Horses Farm, I think.
you're like me. You don't even know your Instagram is. I'm terrible that way.
I want to do that part.
And is there a donate button on the on the Heal with Horses?
There is. Yeah.
All right, lads, you heard that. Donate money, please, now to Heal with Horses. They're doing stellar work out there in Ontario, and there's a need.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Till the next time.
Yeah.
Be
Ciao.
well. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop. You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horseboy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.